countdown. All right. Hot diggity darn. I'm live with Jody Wells, and it has been a while, I will say. How have you been, Jody?
I've been very well. How about you, sir?
I'm doing well as well, obviously. But actually, I've been really actually getting better at things now that I have my Starlink set up. I don't know if you remember, but my internet connection was kind of crappy back in the days when we used to talk. Well, I guess it depended on where I was at the time. Actually, I think I might have been up in Ontario when we were talking before. But here in New Brunswick, where I'm now, where my house is, it's if I had dial up, I literally had like what was it, up to 5 megabytes. Was the best I could do. So streaming was basically not even an option. But now like I say, thanks to Elon Musk and Starlink, couldn't rely on any Canadian options there. The other one we had out this way, ExploreNet, was that one that I was telling you, which was terrible, terrible, terrible service. And there's just constantly having to call them up and complain about outages. And I found out that actually they had this policy called FAP, Fair Access Policy. So basically it's kind of socialism for the internet. They slow you down to make sure everyone else is getting their fair allotment of broadband usage, which is like, but I'm paying, for a service. I expect to get it, but that's kind of something they snuck in there, I guess, in the policy, something that I apparently must have missed. But yeah, with Starlink, I could be literally out in the middle of, I am out in the middle of nowhere and have speeds in the hundreds of megabytes. So I don't have any issues with that no more. Once again, and I didn't know this at the time. I kind of understood a lot of the guys back in the day were the libertarians of Silicon Valley, and Elon is definitely one of those guys. And he's stepping up to take the place in so many areas. And that's one area that I personally have been trying to hammer home to a lot of people when they say, well, who will build the roads, right? Well, who will put, right? Who will put man in space? Well, guess what? Private companies now have proven that they can do it and actually much more efficient, much less cost involved with reusable rockets and everything. And yeah, I can have high-speed internet basically anywhere. You could be out in the middle of nowhere in the Sahara Desert, for crying out loud, and still have high-speed internet. And they're going to start to roll out. And I'm not doing an advertisement for Starlink, but I just got to tell you, it has been a game changer for me. But they're going to start rolling out now even for your cell phone. And even if you don't have cell phone cover, or if you're not hooked up to Starlink, you can use your cell phone in an emergency, even if I don't know if you were into like off-roading adventures. You get out in some areas in the woods, you have no cell phone coverage. The only thing that works out in those type of areas was the old satellite phones that are quite expensive. But now with Starlink, they're going to start rolling it out later this year in the US. I think it's a teaming up with Virgin Mobile. Then they're bringing it to Canada so that basically your cell phone is going to become just like that, one of those satellite cell phones that you can use anywhere and have high speed. So that's a great game changer. But forget about all that stuff. Like I say, I just want to mention because I'm really happy about having that kind of a setup. But the most important thing, obviously, I want to do is catch up with what you've been up to and how things have been. How, I'm not sure. We'll even get to the old trucker convoy thing. See if you knew anything about that. If you were aware of all that stuff, and maybe some of the other crazy Russiagate 2.0 that's going on these days, because they're really desperate to make sure that Trudeau gets another position. But just for the sake of things right now, let's just hear about how things have been over the last, I don't know how many years it's been since we had a conversation, but how have things been? What have you been doing? What have you been up to?
Well, I was actually thinking about that earlier, and I think it's been 10 years because Tom and I started our show right around Gamergate. And then we kept it going through the US presidential election because we were very excited about that.
Yes.
And then I went off to law school.
Okay.
Yes. So I am practicing now, civil liberties.
Excellent. Are you hooked up with any of the organizations that we have? We have a few of them in Canada.
Right. Well, actually, my soon-to-be partner is James Kitchen.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him, but very, very serious about liberty kind of guy.
Right.
So it's been exciting and all very providential, just, how we met, how we ended up hooked up. And yeah, we are trying to figure out if we have liberty in Canada. I don't want to be all depressing.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I've been doing this for a while, so
Not looking good. But we live to fight another day.
yes. Well, that's excellent. Actually, so how long has it been since you actually finished your degree and actually have been out doing this kind of a thing?
Right. So I was called to the Alberta bar in 2022.
Okay, right. During the COVID.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
it's terrible. This is a terrible thing to say because COVID was a blessing for me. It got me
Okay.
out of the physical digs of the most oppressive institution I've yet encountered in my education, which is law school.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then so, sort of about 2/3 of the way through my second year, I ended up at home, and it was a godsend for me. That was a godsend.
Okay.
However, I still strongly object. I mean, not everyone is like me. If I never left my house again, it would be too soon, except for my safe house, which I do as much as possible and take advantage of that Starlink you were talking about.
Yeah.
In the middle of the sticks. But, some people actually wanted to leave their house. And so that was a huge problem. And, if you're part of the laptop class, it's really easy to say, oh, well, it's okay. But, no, you have to think about everybody else.
Right.
And it's not okay. So I've been pretty active in that area.
Okay. I will just say, actually, now that you mention that, because I kind of joked around in some of my live streams, because I went full hardcore during the whole COVID thing in the live streams. I did, I don't know, probably 3-4 a week at least, because I sensed early on some things were getting a little bit crazy. But anyways, I was kind of joking around on my live streams too, because I do live out in the sticks in New Brunswick, rural New Brunswick. It's like, hey, I was practicing isolation long before anyone ever said so. And tell you the truth, it was funny how, because you hear all these different parts of Canada, especially in the big cities, things were getting quite crazy. Heck, for the longest time here in New Brunswick, and because we had at that time Higgs had a minority government, and the 3 MPs were from a People's Alliance Party, more liberty oriented, and they were kind of holding the Higgs government feet to the fire and preventing them from being able to just run through some of the legislation for invoking all these crazy lockdowns and things. So we kind of had a little bit of a reprieve here in New Brunswick until the main guy from the People's Alliance crossed the floor and kissed the ring, and then we lost that kingmaker status. Well, actually, he gave Higgs his majority that he needed, so that changed everything. But yeah, that was a pretty wild time, I will say. But now that I was trying to keep track of 2 things you were saying at the same time, so we covered that. But the other thing I was actually, because you're talking about civil liberties, are you familiar with a gentleman named Bruce Pardy?
Oh, am I?
Aha! Oh, good, excellent. Because yes, we're friends on X there, Bruce Pardy, and I've covered a few of his events that he's covered. One, him and David Haskell had a debate, which was great. It was an excellent debate, and they both basically steelman both positions. I think that both of them would have kind of typically fallen on both sides in terms of the liberty thing, but David kind of took the other side of things. But it was an excellent debate, and Bruce Pardy, when I first heard about the man early on, I was slightly disappointed by sheer fact, because he was still kind of playing the wheelhouse of allowable perspective in terms of the state perspective. But I have since come to realize that it was just him dipping his toes in the water, and he understands intrinsically and at the philosophical level. So that has definitely brought us much closer together, because I've always kind of worried about people that play politics or just talk about things in terms of the legal aspect without bringing philosophical concepts in terms of ethics right to the equation. Because really, laws are supposed to be, at least in the West, our laws are supposed to be, and it even says it in the Canadian Charter of Rights, for all that's worth, but based on not just the rule of law, but God, right? The supremacy of God. And those rule of law are based on the ethics that are underpinned in, the Bible and such, in terms of, those things. So ethics definitely has to be brought into the equation, because the minute I hear anyone talk about laws or legality without those ethical implications, then I realize it's just, might makes right kind of a conversation you're having there, right?
Well, of course. And this is a strange topic for me, because
Okay.
I am a person of faith.
Okay.
At the same time, I am completely, fully liberty oriented. I am the person who says the role of the state is to preserve your liberty so that you might make provision for your safety. There is only one legitimate rule, and that is a prohibition on the initiation of force absent consent. That's me. Right. So, and so of course I butt heads with Christians.
Yeah.
We may believe 99.8% the same thing, and we will still butt heads over this issue of liberty, which I think I'm not only philosophically sound and politically sound. Right. I believe I'm theologically sound in that.
Excellent. Well, can I just actually, now that you mentioned that, because now that I've met all these many years later, and all the learning that I've been doing all over those years, and not just from the many books I've purchased, but listened to like countless thousands of hours of, whether it's audiobooks or philosophical discussions, I got to tell you, I'm really pleased to know these days that I'm still learning. I'm still work in progress, but I have at least amassed enough of the pieces of the puzzle that I kind of get an idea of the macro picture. And I don't know if this will help you in any way, but here's what I've come to understand. So religion, I was raised just like you in a religious family, and I'm very appreciative of some of those great ethics that my grandmother taught me. But I, even as a young man, as a young child, I was very questioning of things, because if it didn't make sense, or if there was contradictions or anything, and that used to piss the adults off, right? It's like, well, just it is what it is, right? But I was not accepting of that. And what I've come to realize is mysticism. I mean, it's kind of baked into the human experience, because there are things that we just can't explain, and some things that even science has not explained. So mysticism is still something that's very much part and parcel of the human experience. My thing is if we're going to have an abstract authority, which to me, right, is really what you're talking about. When you're talking about God, it's an abstract concept of the ultimate authority in terms of what's right or wrong, and the ways you should live. And to me, just like with mathematics is an objective based, field, right? Like 2 + 2 is 4. I mean, sure, there are some people might try to say it's 5, but you don't have to pay much attention to those people, right? But so I prefer things that are objectively true and like philosophically astute and consistent. And one thing I can say about God is you don't necessarily, for the people that maybe aren't like, true believers, or think that there's a magic man up in the clouds somewhere with a big long hair and a big gray beard and stuff, just think of it this way. Would you rather humans we're all fallible, whether you're religious or not, you know that we're all fallible human beings, right? You don't have to learn that from the Bible. But would you rather humans, right, which is what government is, right? It's just comprised of humans. That's all it is, right? There's nothing magic or mystical about the fact that they're human beings that are dressed in, pinstripe suits, very expensive ones and such, and really nice dresses. But would you rather humans, right, which of course they can misinterpret or reinterpret what laws or morality or ethics are, or something that's abstract that's supposed to be above, right, any ground-based or human-based entities in terms of having the ideas or the concepts of what laws or what ethics mean. And to me, that's what I've come to learn is you don't have to be full on like you and I share, and my relationship with God, I'm sure yours might be the same, but my relationship with God is very much a personal one, right? I don't have to go to a church per se, right? Although that's just a way of socializing and reinforcing the stuff. And it's good to do that. But my relationship with God is personal. And like I say, to me, we human beings, I just think of, even if you were on an island, isolated, alone somewhere, you have to have like the concept of what's right from wrong. And to me, those things are now being kind of brought to the secular world. I'll ask you this. Are you familiar with not Jordan Peterson, Stephen Molyneux?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I had my teeth on Stefan Molyneux.
Okay, excellent. So he's trying to kind of bring this realm into like the more objective part of our living experience, which is to show things that are universally consistent. And he calls it universal preferable behavior. So what the modern philosophers, and I think Stefan Molyneux is probably one of the best. Ayn Rand kind of did the same thing to a degree with her objectivist philosophy, is to try to bring it as more, scientific based, more like I say, universally consistent, rather than just rely in the abstract with a mystical authority. Because as we've seen, the minute you remove one mystical authority, and Nietzsche was kind of famous for saying, yeah, we've kind of killed God, but damn, what we got nothing to replace him with, right? And we've seen what filling that vacuum with the state, right? And to me, believers in the state, believers in government, they are very dogmatic, every bit as religious as the people I grew up around. And as we know, the 20th century is filled with people who use these ideologies based on statism that caused, the deaths of tens of millions of people. So that to me was an easy example. Now you can point to the past in terms of Christianity as well, where people were using mysticism, right, by improperly interpreted in the Bible. So we humans have had a really difficult time, but I think we're progressing beyond this point where we just got to solely rely on abstracts or mystical concepts. And that's where I think the philosophy of liberty, right? Not politics, but that's where the philosophy of liberty, and whether you want to call it like bringing UPB to it, although I think you don't even necessarily need UPB, because I think even just the three core tenets of the philosophy of liberty, self-ownership, I own myself, property rights, so anything I build or anything that's constructed in my mind that I've come up with, right? Any of that or anything that's an extension of that, is legit. It's universally consistent. And the non-aggression principle, which is basically the same thing as the golden rule, right? It's the golden rule. Treat people how you want to be treated. Don't use force, violence, coercion, or theft towards them. So I'm really happy to see that this is the kind of stuff that's coming to the forefront. And knowing that someone like yourself, who has like that kind of a background, and now you're into law, and you can bring all that stuff, and because you yourself are on this intellectual or philosophical journey, to me, this is, like I say, it's one thing for us to have conversations like this and kind of function in our little echo chambers to a degree, because we're kind of on the same level. But it's quite another thing to bring these things to these entities or these institutions such as law, because that's what I firmly believe has been missing. And in particular, especially because the West, a lot of people have turned away from God and become more associated or aligned with the state being the final arbiter of what's right and wrong. And we've seen the pitfalls of that. But I'm not one of those people like on the left who let's tear it all down. I don't care for tearing it down. No, let's either build anew, rebuild it, reconstruct if you have to, or build alongside something, a bigger, better setup, or something that's more aligned with these philosophical underpinnings that we're familiar with. So anyways, I know I kind of ramble on there a bit, Jody, but what do you think in terms of the secular aspect and how humans are going to go forward in terms of, do you think is law and ethics at some point in time going to get more based or more closely aligned with things that are universally consistent and less easily interpreted or susceptible to legalese that can turn a right into a wrong pretty damn quick?
I would be very surprised if it did. And it's funny because I know people have now adopted the idea that if you're black pilled, you're a nihilist. Well, of course, I'm not a nihilist because of my faith. So right. I don't really care what happens down here. Right. Ultimately, I'm fighting for it. But at the end of the day, I just believe in a whole different set of things that most people don't believe in. And so it's not as tragic for me, I suppose. But, for example, the charter. What is that worth? I mean, there are a few different ways of looking at it. We have a one-section charter. Any freedom that is not absolute, you don't have, right? That's called a privilege, right? If you have freedom of speech asterisk, and according to the political winds, then we'll just, it's so arbitrary, and pretending it's not doesn't make it not. So, and so I have I have pretty much given up on the charter. I object strongly to taking charter cases.
Mm.
I don't want to talk about the charter is somewhere between a dead letter and a left-handed tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The charter was great for bringing in, all kinds of, for want of a better term, leftist policy, for cementing that and making sure that, I don't have to name the things, you know what they are.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of not being coerced to undergo a therapeutic treatment, let's say,
Yeah.
I won't call it a vaccine on this show because I won't pretend with you.
Right. Good.
It's bad enough that I have to call it that in the court paperwork.
But
this idea that the charter can't protect you from that because, emergency. And meanwhile, of course, the festering hooves of the state have been all over the science. There is nothing to suggest that anything about this is based in reality.
Yeah.
And we're losing.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll tell you, Jody, this is another area where I'm not black pilled per se, but I'm also a realist, and what it is, I try to be upbeat and positive just by sheer fact for my own, mental health and healthy psychology, right? That's the main part. But make no mistake, I could put on a straight face or a facade, but in reality, I'm every bit as concerned about this as you. And I think the main reason for that is even my counterparts to the south of this in America, who have so many advantages compared to us in terms of their heritage, their culture, how the country was founded. That's one area I've always been kind of envious of our American counterparts, is their whole story is based on, right, of this, we're going to stand up for individual freedom against, like ragtag militias, more or less, against, the most powerful government at the time, right, under King George, and continued on that fight. And the way they're, whether you read the Federalist Papers, which I have both, the Anti-Federalist and the Federalist Papers, how the intellectuals at the time, the founding fathers, and the way these kind of things were discussed, and how much they wanted to basically make it airtight. Now, it wasn't perfected by any sense. And of course, as generations continue on, that knowledge gets further and further removed from the psyche of the population. But they did a damn good job in terms, at very least, because 200 some years later, the First Amendment is still, like, they're trying really hard to silence Americans, but it's holding up rather well. And it's not that the parchment or the words written on parchment or paper means anything, but like I say, it's really built into the psyche of most Americans that it's really fundamentally important to have genuine freedom of speech. And because it's been part of their culture and basically like permeated through all areas of the culture, movies, music, television, all these kind of things for so long, that to them, it is something that's just normal for them to fight for. In Canada, the sad part, and of course, let me just mention the Second Amendment, which is so profoundly important. If you're going to have any pretense of freedom, is you have to have the inherent, inalienable right to defy anyone who may even attempt to try to infringe on them. That's the point of the Second Amendment, which so many Canadians don't even understand. Like, it wasn't so that they could go hunting, right? No, right? That was just normal back then. You didn't need to ask permission. No, it was to make sure. And like I say, it was all written into these papers so that the American people understood that, no, this is the only thing that actually defends your rights is you, right? There is nothing that parchment or paper or Canadian Charter Bill of Rights, as we've seen. Perfect example. That was the best litmus test we'd ever had. And how well is this Charter of Rights that we got going to do to defend our freedoms? Well, not at all, especially, and in particular, when you have Section 1 and Section 33 that both basically nullify or negate even the very pretense of having rights. So like you suggested earlier, it's basically suggested that you have privileges, although they wrote them down with the word rights. But once again, if you can take something that should be inherent or inalienable, if you can take it away, well, those words don't mean anything, right? Because if you understand what inherent and inalienable means, no, you can't take them away. So the fact that the Trudeau government felt that they had any kind of right or any kind of authority to take them away. And a majority of our population actually believed in, or at least those who were polled actually believed that government had that pretense. Well, this suggests that not only does government and the Canadian Charter right is written as a means to completely deny us our fundamental rights, but there's a substantial portion of our population that is completely in line with that sentiment, with that kind of mentality, which is the biggest thing I've always been concerned about. And I just constantly rehash and rethink about that amazing quote. And it's just such a short little one by Andrew Breitbart, but it's so profound, is politics truly is downstream of culture. Right? If you don't have a culture of people, which we don't in this country, or at least a sizable portion of them, we had quite a few. We watched the trucker convoy, right? There were some really brave souls that went through a lot of hell to at least be a show of force and be willing to at least, be the bulwark against that. But we seen how quickly Canadians turned against them and fell for the propaganda that was espoused by the media. And that was just soul crushing for me to see that these brave men and women that tried so desperate, put their lives and their livelihoods on the line. They put a lot of their, they worked for decades, some of these people, to build up the capital and their ability to go and do these things, to have these trucks, to be owner operators, and to see all that basically not for nothing, because I do believe it helped inspire a sizable minority of Canadians, but we're still massively outnumbered.
We absolutely are. And this seems to be hardwired into Canadians. I was brought up differently. That's the only thing that I can attribute the difference to. But most Canadians seem to be very happy to have their lives managed, or at least they assume that that's just the way it needs to be. This idea of the administrative state, being necessary because, like you said earlier, well, how will we have roads? Well, we'll have roads if people want them, and there's a market for roads, believe it or not, right? Cell phones exploding in pockets tend to lose sales. So, there's absolutely no idea that the market has a voice and probably the loudest voice, and will take care of these things, right? And Canadians just accept, and it isn't until very recently that some Canadians are cropping up, like we're having some clients who are university students who are being forced to, repeat mantras and whatever thing you want to, whether it's a pronoun thing or whatever. People are realizing that the managerial state is swiping their freedom. But the thing is that this is not a new problem.
No.
First they came for the egg producers, but I was not an egg producer.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of a problem, right? It's been with us since my whole life. Your whole life.
Yep.
We were born into an administrative state, and everyone assumes it's a good thing, and that's an assumption that it just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense if you take it apart and you stop and think about it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. I love how this train of thought's continuing on my own. So anyway, I was actually going to kind of bring this up anyways. So that to me, and here's where I'm trying to psychologize this. And this, I got to tell you, Jordan Peterson helped me a lot in terms of bringing not just philosophy, and I already had a fairly good grasp of history and stuff like that, but bringing psychology to the forefront and in terms of trying to place all these things together really helped me out a lot. And so what do you think of this? So because of that, and I've noticed too, not just Elon Musk, but a lot of the people, your Russell Brands, I could go on and list a bunch of names, but predominantly, now there is exceptions and outliers, but have you yourself noticed that a lot of the people that are anti-state, anti-establishment, more free-thinking individuals are predominantly from the cohort of Gen X's, which is I am, and I believe you might be yourself, are you or not, right? So So, and I think, like I think what kind of separates us from the rest of the cohorts of our generations, and once again, this doesn't mean it's a, all Gen X and like there's lots of overlap, but the ones that seem to have the dominant voice these days and be the ones that are talking about this stuff most profoundly are seemingly Gen Xers. And I can't help but think it's because at that time frame that we were raised, we were one of the few generations. Now, boomers kind of had a little bit of a different scenario because they were the ones that were, came directly after World War II. We were a little bit further removed from that stuff, but we are that last generation, as far as I'm concerned, that still had what we were considered latchkey kids. I know myself and most of the people I ever grew up in, no matter where I lived in, when I lived in Ontario or New Brunswick or even Nova Scotia, almost everyone I knew from the Gen X grew up as basically latchkey kids, whereas your parents were kind of doing their thing. So you were left with a lot of freedom to do whatever the hell you want, as long as you were in before before the street lights came on, kind of deal. So you had to socialize on the fly. You had to learn this stuff in real time in the real world without top down authorities to impose how it should be done. So when you were out playing, right, and whatever you were doing, you had to figure you were being an anarchist because you didn't have authority at that particular time, right, to teach you. And to me, that's the kind of street smarts that a lot of our successive generations don't really have or don't possess because they were raised with a lot of like helicopter parents. And I'm sure a lot of these parents had great intentions, but that is what I see as profoundly, it's so, and it kind of goes against the grain, but people are susceptible to thinking, even myself, you want to help your kids, you want to be there for them, you think you have to, but no, it's actually more of that hands-off approach that actually I think is what gives your kids. And I know even with my own sons, because I raised them basically the same idea that I was raised, because I wanted to, because I like the way that I had those kind of freedoms. And they're millennials, but when I see them and how they act, their maturity level at different age ranges. They're now, my youngest son's 29, my oldest boy is 32. But even when they were in their teen years, I seen a big discrepancy, a big difference between them and the millennials of their age in their classroom, but they were raised with professional parents or by professional parents who went into professional careers, and mom didn't have their kids till maybe in their 30s or so. Whereas typically we Gen Xers or my parents typically had their kids in their teens or their early 20s. So I seen that massive difference because my kids had kids in their class, but they were raised by boomer parents, whereas my kids were raised by Gen X parents. And I see such a profound difference in how they think, how they behave, and all that stuff. They're more willingness to, like I say, take more brave or bold actions, be more autonomous, have more sovereignty, kind of thing. Profoundly different than their kids who were raised with like these parents that were maybe either too overly practicing too much authority or just being too concerned about safety and security, kind of thing. I'm just curious. I know I kind of went off there a little bit, but have you experienced any of this in your own personal life in terms of the demographic trends or changes or differences?
Well, that's very interesting. The one thing that you made me think of is how the public school brainwashing has become worse and worse with every new generation. And I mean, my parents considered it bad enough when I was a child that they basically put us in a sort of it was a private school, but it wasn't it wasn't for wealthy people. It wasn't for, it was basically for libertarians. Okay. It was
Awesome.
it was definitely a Protestant based school, but it was sort of like some families would voluntarily pay more tuition so that other families who otherwise would not be able to afford to attend at the school could attend. Not socialism, because completely voluntary and a community-based thing. And that's because they just they did not trust the public school. My father was sort of the human Marxism detector. And even in the 1980s, it was there, and he saw it there very clearly. It has absolutely become worse. I think we would agree with that.
Oh yeah.
And of course now we have children in daycare. and then in K to 12, and then in the universities. And it's one massive brainwashing regime, sort of from cradle, right through to, and then you're spit out into a workforce that has now gone ESG, right?
Yeah.
You want to get ahead, if you want. So the motivators are different. I don't know how much it is to do with the parents, mind you. The parents are probably doing all of the things that you've said, but realistically, how much influence do the parents even have? And what I like to say, people will come to us for legal assistance, and anyone, you have a case, you want to fight, great, we're here to fight. The honor is in the fight. But, I think the most effective thing that people could probably do is exit the public school system en masse.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And actually, my youngest son there, him and his fiance, she's pregnant. She's, was she 25 weeks there now? And we've had this conversation, and we'll continue to have this conversation in terms of when it does finally come time for, her to, we know it's a girl, by the way. Yeah. I'm having a granddaughter, which is great. The wife's so excited, of course, and all that. But anyways, yeah, we're actually really, really talking about this stuff, and there's a lot of things, and I'm so happy and pleased to see that both of them are on board with not just the conversation in terms of how schooling is going to play out. And we're so fortunate today to live in the information age where you actually have resources, if you do want your children, because, that would be a major concern for me if you have parents that maybe aren't properly suited for being educators. At least you do have the capacity these days, and there are tons of resources online by not just libertarian type institutions, but there's resources like I say, just littered all over the internet. Great. So that you can actually teach your kids if you don't want to put them in these public schools. And I would definitely suggest either you avoid them entirely, or if for the people who maybe, don't have that option for some reason, whatever that reason may be, bare minimum, if you do have to put your kids in a public school, my kids went through a public school. The only thing that was the counter to that was having parents like me and my wife, because without that, and being actively involved in your kid's life, right? So that they at least get that counter. Because to me, I was never worried about my two sons being susceptible to that kind of indoctrination, because they were definitely putting that stuff forward. Even my youngest son, just from my oldest boy to my youngest son, it was crazy. Even just in those 3-year difference, they already were getting to the point where when he graduated, all grade 12 students, I think it was 30 or whatever, got some kind of thing. Instead of, you get the top 5 that get some kind of award. No, everybody got one. So we seen that it was already changing directly. But like I say, I never had to concern myself with them, because I didn't just talk to them about things and help try to explain things. I led by example. I was an actual walking, talking example. I made mistakes in my life, but I also showed them, the best way to pull yourself up when you make mistakes, and the things to take that personal responsibility and take those. So I led by example, which was, I think, a key factor. My wife was as well, but I also helped teach them, but it wasn't something where they like, I had to feel like I had to jam it down their throat. I made it in a way that they were susceptible to even wanting to learn these things. And I know not everyone has that capacity within them, but like I say, anywhere where you may fall short, there are resources out there to help you along the way. And I definitely recommend, I agree with you 100%, Jody, is if you want to have the best chance to have a really close knit relationship with your kids and have a much better, more well-adjusted, mentally healthy child and grow into a healthy adult, you have to, at the bare minimum, make sure that you do your best to make sure that they're educated in a manner that actually teaches them to think, not what to think, but to actually think, problem solving skills. And there's lots of ways you can do that without even using academia as that pretense. If you teach, and I've noticed this myself, if you teach someone problem solving skills, mechanics, believe it or not, it's crazy when you think about this. If you gave me 2 people, right, someone that took social sciences, let's say in school, or a mechanic, a dirty old greasy mechanic with dirt under his fingernails, right? which one, if I could sit them both down and try to explain libertarianism, the philosophy of liberty to them, which one would probably be able to figure that out or get more on board of adopting that kind of a mentality for themselves? Or I got to tell you, it's probably going to be the mechanic. There's going to be obviously exceptions, outliers, but once again, a mechanic has problem solving skills. One that actually has actual practical experience in the real world, not theoretical. I'm not talking about a mechanic that has only learned something in school in theoretical, but someone that actually has been doing it for years and years, let's say, or decades of their life. They've learned problem solving skills. And what problem solving skills are, obviously what that represents is your ability and your capacity to think outside the box and to be willing to accept new information, even if it counters prior information, because that's the only way. Same, especially if you're in the performance world, because the performance world is constantly filled with people who have done something that no one else has done before. So their minds are completely open in terms of that kind of stuff. So I do recognize there are certain people that are more susceptible and it's easy to accept that stuff. But once again, I just can't stress enough how much of these resources are actually out there for us. And it's something that I think is really, really, really important. And it's going to take a while, just like you. The long-term thing, and others like people like Stephen Molyneux has talked about it. Even Bruce Party himself is this is a long-term thing here, folks. We're not going to get ourselves out of this mess, no matter how well articulate we are and how good of an internet connection we may have and all that stuff. This is a long-term project, and it's something but we got to start somewhere. We got to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was listening to something this morning, and the gentleman who is a quite famous U.S. judge was saying, we need to be winsome, we need to be charming, and I am not very winsome and charming when I'm articulating that. Just keep your festering hooves off me. Like, do whatever you want, but don't tread on me, right? That's not particular. So I have to give that some thought. I feel like I'm perhaps not very persuasive because I tend to, I have a line. Don't cross it. Yeah. And for me, it's that simple, right? Death is a fair price for liberty. That was my COVID stance. Right. The virus was barely even a twinkle in that bat's eye. And of course, I understand what I'm saying when I say that. Bit of misinformation there, but I do mean it as a joke. I was just saying, look, death is a fair price for liberty. Like, I don't know what this thing is. I have no idea. When they started talking about manufacturing the vaccines, they weren't even here yet, and I'm saying, oh, well, I'm not taking that. It may have been the fountain of youth. I did not care. If the government tells me to take a shot, I am 100% not taking it. Right.
Well, sorry, go ahead. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow there. So
no, that's about it. I mean, death is a fair price for liberty. Most people do not agree with that. Most people won't get on board with that statement. And that's where I am.
I know that's a sad reality I've had to come to reflect on too. And the reason why I know what you're saying is true is because I don't just use my online activities as a means to gauge the world around me, because it can be quite easily manipulated, skewed in some way. So and as you realize, I'm the same way, whether I'm on the internet as when I'm out. It's same with why I choose even to do live streams, because to me, it's no different than if I was out having a conversation, right? I don't get to edit when I'm out having a conversation out in public, right? So I want it to be as natural and free flowing, and I have nothing to hide. I like I say, I wear my heart on my sleeve kind of thing. So I talk to not just fellow workers, but customers when we're going around. By the way, I work for a paving company. So I know all about building roads. Don't need no government for that. Never seen a politician out there before, to be honest with you. but anyways, but yeah, I talk to, like I say, customers. If I'm at the wife's work, if there's something that comes up and the people, her coworkers are talking about things, I'll intervene myself and offer my 2 cents. So I'm always, and a lot of it is to gauge, how people in the physical space are as comparison or contrast to in the online world, right? But no, it's there's a lot of Canadians that are very susceptible, like you say, to just I guess they perceive of it as going along to get along as them being nice in some way. I guess I and I guess that's the kind of their go-to thing. But at the same time, there's nothing nice, and to me, it's that just like with you with the it seems nice, but it's I've always said, to be honest with you, I don't know if it's because I'm a man or not, but I have way more respect to that, that brutal dictator guy, the big strong man who's willing to look me right in the eyes and maybe I'll feel the ground tremble as he and his horde are charging fast against me. But he has the balls, the courage, and conviction to at least show what his intentions are. And so I can see that shit coming from a mile away. My biggest concern and what I seen in Canada, not just from the Trudeau Liberals and those type of people, but so many other Canadians, is the pretenseness of nice, but are more than willing to shank you the minute they get close to you. So I picture someone like Trudeau and a lot of our fellow Canadians is they put on the pretense that they're trying to do it for the greater good or for you or for your safety or for your health, but they're the kind of people that, once again, they don't have the kind of courage to go against someone like myself. So what they do is they'll give me tons and tons of platitudes or useless rhetoric to suggest that they care so much about me. So they'll allow them to get close enough to those. As soon as they're close, boom, they're shanking me right in my fucking kidneys. You know what I mean? That to me, as a man, I can feel my fucking the heat, my body temperature rising right now, because like I say, I don't fear too many men, to be honest with you, but the people that do cause me to have a little bit of or heightened concern are, like I say, these people that are saying, and I forget that quote, the worst tyranny of all is the tyranny that suggested that it's for my good, right? And that really pisses me off, because once again, they're not even willing to, like I say, I look at external observers, they would see the big strong man that's trying to tyrannize me. They could recognize that instantly. But the silent majority, the people who don't pay particular attention, a lot of them are still convinced by the rhetoric that Trudeau espouses and people of his ilk and people during the lockdowns. And I watched countless videos, I'm sure you did. And people would believe, oh, but they're doing it for people's safety. Like, oh, you're gonna fucking send these people out to go, beat up some guy because he walked his dog in a park, and that's the good guy? Those are the good people? What was this guy doing? He was walking his dog. Or this one who just had his child out in the playground because he was sick of being stuck in the house all the time, right? And yet the bylaws officer just cost this man probably a month worth of his pay, or 2 weeks worth of his pay that he needs to pay to feed his child and stuff. Why? Because he was actually doing something for his child that was going to be better for his kid. To me, and when I seen all this stuff playing out, and like I say, it happened in my own personal space. I actually had just one, mind you, but I had one friend. She was a girl that was actually, she's the daughter of a friend. So I guess a friend's daughter, but she was kind of like a friend too, who, literally unfriended me from Facebook and everything by simple fact of me, sharing content that was, not so friendly to the vax regime, right? And to me, once that hit me right, like I say, it wasn't just abstract anymore. It was like, it was personal. And I just couldn't believe it, because this girl should know. She knows me personally. She knows my history. She knows I wouldn't have any ill intentions or wish any harm on her or anything like that. Nor did I ever, during any of my live streams, suggest that anyone should do anything. I just give people information. What you do with it, that's completely up to you, right? But the fact that I was very happy to see that my whole family, for that matter, which showed that at least my inner circle, my family, those closest to me, not one of us fell for it, Jody. I can say not one of us. Not one of us put the jab in our arms. Not one of us regret it. Not one of us, were willing to yield or conform. And my wife, I got to tell you, she was the one that went through it the worst, because the one thing she did have to do to maintain her employment, because she does work in the groceries, like in retail, is she had to do the damn mask thing. And it was tough for me, because I knew, she knew, we all knew that it was basically just a show of conformity. because it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't going to prevent. It might stop some of the droplets, but I mean, basically, it's like a chain link fence with, like there's just so many rooms and area for that virus to get through. If it, if you breathe long enough, which we kind of got to do that, right? But it really pissed me off that my wife had to wear that for month after month after month after month on end, and it was tough. It was tough, anyways. But yeah, I'm sure you have lots to say in terms of that experience.
That is rough. That is rough. And my colleague I was speaking of earlier, James Kitchen, he was one of the guys that went hard on not masking. He refused. He would go into court. There are court transcripts of the judge, picking this bone with him about masking, and him explaining that, look, I have an exemption, and if you want to see it, I'll share it with you. My clients, however, they have exemptions, but I can't offer you that, but I can offer you mine. This is in court transcripts. How ridiculous. But he was really, I was not that courageous. I guess we all pick our battles. People did what they felt that they could do. Everyone has a line, I fortunately didn't have a job where I had to wear a mask so much. I feel terrible that your wife did. That's awful. I don't blame her for doing it. People had to do what they had to do for themselves.
Right.
I wasn't particularly impressed with the people who said, I don't want to receive this shot, but I want to go to Mexico. I kind of felt, like that. Okay.
Yeah.
If a man had to feed his kids,
yeah,
I had a different take on it. I mean, not that I should be judging what anybody does, but the point that I'm making is that I'm not talking about people who wanted to take it. I'm talking about people who didn't want to take it, and about what their reasons were for doing it. And it was a little bit difficult to watch that. But some people were hardcore about everything, including the masks. James was one of them. And I have just the greatest respect for those people. I eventually got there. I would go to the grocery store without it, and people would come running up to me, and I would get out my, I'm in BC, so I had written this thing for the workers' compensation. It was on their website, and it was explaining about how if people are exempt, you have to just take their word for it. You shouldn't be inquiring into their medical condition. I mean, it was the one thing that she did that I'm not a fangirl, but it was the one thing she did that was useful. And so I printed off like 100 of those. I kept them in my car, and every time I went in somewhere, I'd just be like, I'm exempt. Here, that's for you to keep. go about business, right? But I mean, it was so bizarre, and it wasn't uniform across provinces, across cities, across establishments. I mean, we had Save On Foods. What's his name? I should know this. Jim Pattison. Pattison saying, I'm not gonna force people to mask in my grocery stores.
Good.
Like, all are welcome, right?
Good.
So
Excellent.
That was pretty sweet, right?
Yeah.
Guy's not known for being super kindly, but I guess that was a line for him. And you had other people. You had somewhere in the Maritimes. I don't think it was your province. Maybe it was Nova Scotia. It's either Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, where I think grocers were saying that they were going to ban unvaccinated people, weren't going to be able to come into the grocery store and shop. And, the attitude of our fellow Canadians, at least the loudest ones, was, basically, if you're not going to toe the line, then, maybe you should starve, or maybe you should go to jail, or maybe you should get thrown into a concentration camp. I just couldn't believe how insane people were being about it. I mean, I'm not stopping you from getting, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can mask in triplicate if you want, wear an agent fare to the grocery store. Like, I don't care. I'm not stopping you from doing whatever it is that you feel that you need to do. But there was no reciprocation of that. And that was terrifying. I was never afraid of a virus, but I was terrified about the politics around it.
Yeah. Well, like you say, well, well, we had the Atlantic bubble. So yeah, it was definitely here. I can't remember myself, even if it was New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, but it might have been actually both of the provinces in terms of that. But I remember that actually, if you ever want to fill your boots there, go back through my live streams because I covered, like I say, all of it. I journalized that whole, like I say, and that was the main reason why I did it and why I covered it and did so many videos and live streams, like long form live streams, because I wanted to make sure to document and cover everything, right? But of course, my brain, I can't try. I got to. There's so much extra stuff, so I kind of let that stuff go because I know I have it to refer to if I want to in the future. But yeah, here in Atlantic Canada, like I say, they had this bubble, but it was strange because once everything started going really crazy tyrannical, it just went nuts because I'm not sure if you had it out in BC, but we had the vaccine passports here. Did you have them in BC as well?
Um, I mean, it depends what you mean by that. I kind of think so. I'll be honest with you. I just stopped going places. I mean, when the
Right.
restaurant said you must be vaccinated, so whether you had to show, physical paperwork or whether it actually had to be an
Mm.
app, I'm not sure about because I just withdrew. I
Right.
just
Okay.
withdrew and said, you know what, I'm not interested. If you don't want me in your restaurant,
Yeah.
I'll just do that. I'll
Oh
never
yeah.
come there again.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
fine with that,
Well,
right?
no, that was the same with me, but actually I was working at the time and I was surprised because in my own community where I live, I was very appreciative and grateful of the fact that actually our local store here that's basically a general store all around, does everything. It's even the liquor store and everything, basically. And then we have a gas station, but neither of those businesses actually, because I went those places, I went without a mask and I could see the eyes, right? But no one ever bothered me. And it was the same with even the vaccine, like even when the vaccine things were out, no one bothered me to ask me. But it was very strange because another small community, which I would have figured all these small communities would have been at least some the same because they have to, before they had to live around each other, very close knit communities, right? And you're going to have to live amongst each other even after this is done. So you might want to treat each other with a little bit of dignity and respect, which I think was something that was very, front and center in people's psyche here. But strangely enough, I was working me and like I say, we do paving. We were doing shouldering. So fixing the shoulder after you've paved the road, extend it, make it wider. And we laid down the material for the shouldering. And this was in Chipman, New Brunswick, another small community. And I was just amazed. It's not even big enough to have a Tim Hortons. They had what's called a Robin's Donuts. It's a small franchise. I don't think it's that big, but it's kind of here on the East Coast. And I went there. And now this was on a Monday. This Wednesday was when the whole vaccine passport, basically you have to show your documents to go into anywhere, right? You had to have the proof of vaccination, right? It was Wednesday when the government was making it. This Wednesday is when it was going to be implemented. It has to be started and it's mandatory. So you still got Tuesday. You got 2 days of grace there. You don't even have to if you don't want to. But this lady that was working at that Robin's Donuts, me and the other guy that was running the loader went to get ourselves a coffee. And she asked for this. Do you have your vaccine documentation? No, the other person did. He's really quick to show it, right? He's like, whatever, man. But anyways, I won't. I try not to judge too badly, or harshly. But I was like, no, I don't have. I just want a coffee. Can I just get a coffee, right? Anyways, no. She said that basically, and I said, but we don't even need. It's not even mandatory. Well, my boss told me to start doing it as of today. So I was like, well, okay. Well, if your boss is preempting like that, let me just tell you, you can have your coffee. And I guarantee you, I assure you that I will be talking about this basically till the day I die. I'll tell my grandkids this story at some point in time. And I also suggest never, ever, 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 ever frequent Robin's Donuts in Chipman, New Brunswick in your life because the boss there and even his employees are willing to go through or force their customers, the people that actually keep their business going, to go through this kind of fucking strange regimen of bullshit which it makes no sense other than the fact that I'm just complying with the state. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of people who are just blindly or willingly complying with the state without any understanding of this stuff themselves. And I got to say, I won't. And now, like I say, fortunately here in New Brunswick, and just like with you, I, for the most part, stayed kind of in my own little community. And because my wife works at a grocery store, I didn't really have to go out and do anything in terms of shopping. The what she already was there, so it did help me tremendously by sheer fact that the few things that we did have to shop for, which is groceries, I didn't have to worry about that. Didn't have to, and most of the other things, if I wanted something, well, rather than going to anywhere that wants to treat me like a second class citizen, well, I'll just order it online, right? Amazon exists, right? So I'll do whatever I can to avoid or skirt these fucking ridiculous rules that were, yeah. But it really annoyed me because it wasn't just like, and I'm sure it's the same with you. And actually, that was kind of what I wanted to follow up with. Is so me, of course, it bothers me, but I'm very close knit with my family. I'm all about family, and it bothered me more than even them screwing with me. It bothered me so much when they mess my family. But I'm just curious as for you. Do you have close family members or friends or other people, maybe neighbors or stuff? Like, what did you have any issues with people that are in your inner circle? Did you have any confrontations with them, or were they mostly on side with you and questioning things themselves?
Well, I was lucky. My parents are my best friends, and my
Excellent.
sister,
Good.
and they raised me to be whatever this is.
Right
So
on.
no problem there whatsoever. It was just, it was unthinkable. It was unthinkable. And my husband, same thing. Just, he's kind of an old hippie. And although the old hippies did disappoint in COVID times for the most part, but not him. He's just like, yeah, no, if the government's telling you to do weird things, then you just sort of don't do them. It's automatic for some people, and maybe that's not the best basis. But my healthy mistrust of the government and my husband's and my family's, it didn't come to us. We grew even closer.
Excellent.
And it was just we used to go out together, and it was just a matter of sort of just gathering out at the safe house together. Nothing much changed for us, except the venue. And a couple of friends, I had one friend who, she sort of told me, well, I can't see you in person anymore because my husband doesn't want me to, and my daughter, who's a nurse, doesn't want me to. And that was disappointing. But I just kind of went, okay, well, I guess, COVID was such an IQ test, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a bit of a loyalty test.
Yeah.
And the people that couldn't see anymore,
Mm-hmm.
then you just grew apart from them, and the people who could see you all the time, and this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You grew closer to them. And so, I mean, there was a bit of a rearranging of relationships, but I am incredibly lucky that the people that I love dearly were on side.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy for you, Jody. I really am. That's really important. It was the same with me. That's what I mean, people. It's so important to have those, close knit relationships with you in your personal space, in your immediate family or your friends, because that can help you get through a lot. And it was the same for my family. We kind of leaned on each other to get through that stuff. But in addition to, like you say, the IQ test, for me in particular, once again, being a bit of a history buff, constantly, learning about these things in the past. And of course, this is kind of a lot of people now kind of use this example, but it would be no different under Stalinist or Russia or Mao's China. But obviously the one that's at the front and center of most people's head is like, you think about, the German people, like they're very intelligent, they're, quite advanced, even in the 1930s and 40s in terms of their development and, great, universities and all this stuff. And a lot of people like us, you think, well, how in the hell do you get millions and millions and millions of these people on board with this fucking nonsense, right? This collectivism, this authoritarian collectivism, and using the other, right? And it all uses the same premises: fear of the other, right? Or something dirty or whatever, right? Like the Jewish people, they used to call them whatever, right? And the fact that, but what it is it actually, it showed that even now, even what, almost 100 years later, well, 90, I guess, 80, 90 years later, that humans, I mean, we've advanced to the point where we live in, like I say, the modern, what I call the Enlightenment era 2.0. We have access to the breadth of all of human knowledge and a lot of shit you don't want to learn, but still, it's all out there if you're willing to scour the internet. Like, amazing. The Library of Alexandria pales in comparison to what we have access to today. But yeah, even 90 years later, I watched, it's like, okay, I don't question how Maoist China came to exist. I don't question how Stalinist Russia came to exist. I don't question how Hitler's Germany or Mussolini's Italy come to. I completely understand it now. There's a simple formula, really, and it seems to work like a charm. And that, to me, was the most disturbing thing. Is like, even this far removed, even with this amount of knowledge, even knowing, like, even young people, maybe not so much, but most people know of the horror stories of Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia or Mao. But wow, fell for it. At least, like I say, the plurality or the majority, however you want to parse those numbers out, they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And to me, that was like, fuck. So this is really important, and why I understand nowadays. It really is, and I don't know how you bring it to exist. I don't know how you bring it to fruition, but liberty, and I've said this many times in the past, even without really thinking of it dark or deeply enough, but I sure as hell now, is liberty starts right here. And I mean, you got to get people. I mean, I don't know how the hell you get them up there. And I got to help but thank the parents first and foremost, community leaders, right? And I guess that was kind of the thing with the church back in the day. You know, if you watched through COVID, the church was actually a bulwark against statism to a degree, because if you think about a lot of, I would say, especially in particular that I'm familiar with, the Protestant background and Baptist types and stuff, is they're taught that their ultimate authority is God, right? And that to me was a bit of a bulwark, because if you looked at the kind of people, hashtag not all, once all kinds of exceptions and outliers, right? Saw lots of bad pastures. But I did notice that they punched way above their weight in terms of the kind of people who were out there standing against this shit, right? And I've even seen, and man, it sure makes me proud to see even secular atheists, like even people like Stephen Molyneux, even now has a much deeper respect for those kind of people, those religious people, by sheer fact that, yeah, they were the ones that literally kind of, pushed back against this stuff to a high degree. And I got to say, that was quite profound to see that it was people in the religious community that aren't the ones that are susceptible to the being indoctrinated into the state or the religion of statism, because they already have their own ideology kind of thing. They don't need to substitute it or add to it. They have exactly and profoundly or what they need, right? So that was an amazing thing. But what do you think, and what are your thoughts in terms of like the religious aspect, and seeing how that predominantly group that did have that, and even myself, like I have that Christian background. I gotta think that even though I understand philosophy and all that stuff, I gotta think that helped me in some regard. So it's kind of a sad thing now that I think about that at 53 years old, that yeah, we've basically, even in my community, churches are falling by the wayside, fast and steady. There's still some around, but what is going to fill that void, that vacuum?
Right. Of course. Well, I mean, we know with all of just as an example, the critical race theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is an original sin concept,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whiteness or whatever you want to call it. This is just original sin for,
Yeah.
postmodernists or whatever, right? So you're quite right. I mean, it is all religion. Now, of course, I don't think that Bruce Party wrote that paper about the virtue people versus the freedom people.
Yes. Excellent.
And I agree with him. I don't think that what we're fixing to do is say, well, you didn't like our religion, but you replaced it with this much worse religion. So we're going to go back to our religion now. And you're going to, I don't think that that's the solution. No. Because I think that each must be convinced in his own conscience. Mm-hmm. And I think that but I do agree with you that some of these, particularly some of the evangelical Christian groups, punched above their weight in terms of pushing this stuff back. And I think what we want to do is we want to fish. We want people to come to an understanding of freedom and God and the theological underpinnings of freedom and come into the fold, but voluntarily. Like I don't think we want to legislate anything like that. And I think that the church has a role to win people, but not to force people. And there's a huge difference there. And there is a huge dust up in the freedom movement between the freedom people and the virtue people on that front, because most of the virtue people are Christians, right? Or most Christians are virtue people, I think. I feel like I'm an outlier. And so sorry, I might have lost sight of your question.
or no, like I say, well, to me, actually, it's going along the same lines. Is I completely agree with you, and I actually tried it in my own community. I did it for 2 months because you can rent the rec center here for fairly cheap, and I just set it up and I made up a little kind of curriculum thing. It didn't really pan out. Maybe at some point in time, people will be more susceptible and maybe they'll be more easily or more willing to do this. But I come up with this thing called Liberty Lessons, and basically what I want to do, because I do live in a community that especially a lot of the older people are very much religious Christians, right? But I try to, and with people like Jordan Peterson helping understand to me, right? Because I never took all the verses of the Bible literally when I was a kid, and I could always poke holes, especially in the Old Testament stuff, right? The New Testament was much better, but people like Jordan Peterson really helped me on that journey in terms of so really what the Bible is comprised of are meta stories, right? They're just really grand narratives to help guide human beings from being just, amygdala based knuckle dragging apes to things that actually function completely outside the normal state of nature, with this thing that's really underpinned with ethics and morality. It's baked into the Christian ethos, right? And to me, it's how can we do this? Because I too am very fearful, as if you go back to the religious realm, it sounds good in theory, but once again, they had hundreds of years of experiment under even Christianity, and you've seen how that could be quite detrimental, right? Because now you're relying on other people to be the intermediaries. So the preacher and they can, just like a politician, they can interpret the Bible or whatever they want to suit their own goals, and we've seen how they've done that in the past. And the Old Testament is quite adapted for creating slavery on a rampant scale and allowing people to be serf subjects of slaves. The New Testament did a much better job placing Jesus, the individual, at the core and all that stuff, right? And that sovereignty and the free will. I think the New Testament was much better. But just like the New Testament is profoundly better than the Old Testament, well, yeah, I don't want to go back to the New Testament as the basis for humans. I like I say, I've coined my own little phrase. It hasn't caught on yet. Hopefully will someday. But I really think we're living in what I coined Enlightenment Era 2.0, right? And I think what we have to do, what's most important, and I think it's kind of happened at the grassroots level now with your Jordan Petersons. I wish Stephen Molyneux would actually be brought into the fold again, right? Because I think you need philosophers, you need psychologists, you need all these people coming together. You need this kind of stuff so all these ideas can come together where we can figure out how can we have something that's as grounded as mathematics, but in the secular world, without having to rely on mysticism at all. You can just test your hypothesis up against anything, just like with math, or gravity. You can go anywhere on the planet, you can test these things, and they're going to give you the same reproducible result. That's something that I think ethics, in terms of it, because if you can get 2 or 3 generations, now we can kind of understand this. Our generation is probably not going to be susceptible, because you can't teach some old dogs new tricks, but not all, right? But I think it's in terms of generations coming up, even under Gen Z, now they're Gen Alpha, I guess the new one's coming. But if we can get something in place by that time, where once again you could have something where people can be taught, and you don't need 12 years of this stuff or anything, but people can be taught at a young age, and then it can be reinforced through our culture, right? Because that's the thing. I've always come to learn that, yes, I got a lot of my ethics, not just from Christianity, but from some of the movies, television shows, right? Music that I use and listen to. Country music has some of the best, love stories are the best, like in terms of tales, in terms of keeping relations together and all that stuff. And movies and television, there was always lots of examples where, the ethical implications of what the actors or what the people do during the storyline. And it's much easier absorbed, right? For a younger person, right? For a younger person, it was much easier for me to absorb those kind of ethics, let's say watching Star Trek, right? Than it was to go to church per se, because like I say, it was strange for me as a child, and especially when they get into the whole, seemed very culty at times. But to sit down and watch a movie or a television show, but if we can figure this stuff out, and if the great minds that who are going to be, dominating our culture and the discourse can kind of figure it a way so that people can easily learn and adapt some really, actually, I don't think they're that difficult of concepts, to be honest with you. But if we can seamlessly interpret them in a manner that's, like I say, solidified to the point where you can't misinterpret them. They're so blatantly obvious. We could get to some point, like I say, I'll admit that's way above my pay grade. I don't know how to do it myself, but I'm constantly trying, and I'm willing to offer any assistance to anyone. I'll constantly keep doing whatever I can. But yeah, I think we need people like, and your Bruce Parties who have a legal background, like I say, your Jordan Petersons. The problem that I'm seeing with a lot of the people with the prominent voices these days, and let me know what your thoughts are on this, because I respect every single one of them. I have much respect and admiration for all of them, but I think it's still kind of degrading, like, or at least the ones that have the most dominant voices out there. It's still somewhat degrading to left versus right, us versus them politics, and that concerns me tremendously, because the conversations or the ideas that should be placed front and center is, what the hell does it mean to be a free human being? That one thing, and that's what I hammer home on. I've been doing it for years, and the more I try to do what I do, it seems the lesser of the audience I have. And I get it, because it's probably not exciting. It's not as exciting as like Team Red versus Team Blue. I get that, right? It's not as sensationalized and all that. But I firmly believe that I'm just going to stick in my lane. And I think at some point in time, maybe either they'll catch up to me or I'll catch up to them one way or the other. But we'll hopefully meet at some point in time where we can make that the dominant conversation, and then just extrapolate that and go from there. Like, what does it mean to be a free human being in the 21st century? Can we at least sit down and have these discussions, rather than it's got to be my team to win this election because that other team is so terrible? Because I've watched that play out for my whole life. So anyways, what's your thoughts on that there, Jody?
I think that both teams are terrible. I think that left and right is not the and has probably never been the correct way of thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's authoritarian versus libertarian, basically. And there are a number of different ways of saying that. I'm not saying you have to be a libertarian, but I actually think that the left and the right, conservatives and, let's say, progressives, are incredibly similar, and they're both authoritarian. But this is the issue I'm having, right?
Yeah.
And so this is something else that our friend Bruce has described very nicely.
Yep.
This is not a line. This is a horseshoe, right? So we have conservatives and we have progressives.
Yeah.
And down here that we have people who actually believe in freedom.
Right? No, that's a good point.
Truly, we are the centrists.
Yeah.
We're thought of as the radicals.
Yeah.
The ones who are way out there, but truly we are the centrists. And it doesn't matter what label you want to slap on that. I'm politically homeless. I don't call myself a libertarian. I don't call myself a classical liberal.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what I am. I'm just a person who wants to live in freedom. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm a person, I am completely and utterly devoted to my faith in Christ. I don't believe that we legislate that for other people.
No.
That is not just contra liberty, that is contra theology. If God gives us free will, why would we accept less from man? It's that simple. Yeah. It is a false equivocation to say that, oh, well, I'm promoting God's law. No, you're not. You are promoting your interpretation of God's law.
Yeah.
You are not God. Christ is not on the ballot.
Right.
So stop, right?
Yeah.
So don't go there. And that's me. I mean, I think that if we can help people understand the advantages of liberty, that's a steep climb, though, Bennett, because
it is.
It requires responsibility. And I don't mean responsibility in the sense that conservatives use that term. I'm not talking about virtue and you have to live exactly like me. I'm talking about the kind of responsibility where you actually have to pay the consequences of your own choices.
Yes.
And I think that many Canadians aren't super game for that kind of responsibility. I
Yeah.
think they like the safety of being told, wear your mask and everything will be okay. Get
Yeah.
your job and everything will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, that's the thing about with that kind of top down ideology. It really does keep, like, I perceive of most of my fellow humans, they're adults, they walk around in adult bodies, but they still have adolescent minds, as far as I'm concerned. If you talk to them, and that's that area, they just haven't reached that fully autonomous state in terms of their psychology. Their body is caught up to it. They're full grown human beings, but their mind, and that is what the religion of statism it does to a person. It keeps them. And even, I suppose, even, you could use that in some of the religious context, is there's always, when you have that, always that authority, right? You're always having this authority. So it keeps you more of that infantilized kind of psychology. But let me throw this at you, Jody. So in addition to the conservative and progressive, and those are perfect labels to describe the left versus right. But let me throw this one at you, because once again, that's why I listen to people from so many different backgrounds, and it helps me so profoundly to be able to, like I say, place these pieces of puzzle together. So once again, bringing the whole psychology, and even let's bring sex into the equation here. What I've come to learn and is left versus right can also be broken down along sex. So left predominantly is if you take the top 5 personality traits, right? Left would predominantly be lean towards women, whereas right would kind of lean towards men. And what authoritarianism, what the state does is, imagine woman, so the left, with a big giant proverbial gun in the room, right? And if they want to, so women care a lot about nurturing, right? And safety, and which is great when you have small children and infants. Very, 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 very important. But if you take that and you make that as the overarching emphasis that you're going to place on society is safety and nurturing, but you're using gun, because that's what the state is. The state represents force. So you're using force to impose what are predominantly female traits, right? It's the same with the man and the conservative thing. They're using the kind of the more of the male type of psyche and thing. So that's why it seems to gravitate. You will find, if you look at people who identify on the left, you would see a lot. It'd probably be more profoundly women that would be identifying the left, and it'd be, if you go the other way around, be predominantly maybe men. But there's, like I say, this is not to suggest that there's not exceptions, outliers, and all kinds of gray area in between. But I'm just saying, as a general statement, right? So they're playing against our inherent natures, our intrinsic natures as men and women. They're playing against this. Whereas when you say centrist, I 100% agree with that as well. But I would just say, as a woman and me as a man, we're just people that understand that as a man, I shouldn't use force, right? What my dominant characteristics, and not try to impose that on people, and you as a woman. So really what the centrist is just men and women both, or left versus right, but people are willing to engage in dialogue, conversation, to try to figure things out, rather than to resort to immediately using force or violence or coercion or theft as our ultimate means to an end. And I can't help but remember when I was being raised, that was kind of a big thing when I was being raised, where it wasn't just parents, teachers, principals, preachers, everybody beat kids. That was when I was growing up, that was how you teach them, right? And once again, but I remember as a kid, and I don't know if all kids thought the same way I did, but I remember thinking, so I threw a snowball up in the air when I was in school, and it come down and hit a girl in the head. I didn't do it on purpose, but I got strapped for it, right? And I remember, like, you're not to throw, so while you're causing violence to me, you're suggesting that I somehow, and I didn't even do it on purpose, but let's just say I even did it. So, but if you're saying that you're using violence to tell me not to use violence, well, even as a kid, I understood you're a fucking hypocrite, right? So it didn't teach me a whole lot, to be honest with you. And that was something that I did so different when I raised my 2 sons. Never used any, never beat them, never did any of that stuff, and they learned right from wrong without having to use violence. Had to raise the voice from time to time. Kids do need to be corrected. That's just a reality. You can't be hands off. But no, you can't use the might makes right, or I'm bigger than you, therefore, as the means to teach kids. Because that's what you get, right? That's what you get in the world. That you are producing and providing exactly what we're seeing today. And that was a big thing for me. So whether you're a man or a woman or left versus right, the biggest thing is, to figure out ways to use your words, right, or to lead by example without sometimes even have to use words. And I think that creates a much better or healthier culture. But my question to you is, Jody, so let's take us into account, because this is something I've kind of wondered and I've asked other people. So let's say we're the ones that are thinking of these things, doing these things, and we're going to implement these ideas and do the right thing. I always worry about, but what if we're doing the right thing and we're willing to, not use, what about the people who are our opponents that want to use violence as their means to an end? Does that not automatically kind of put us at a major disadvantage?
Oh, well, the prohibition is on the initiation of
Right.
force.
Good.
And,
Yeah. Nice.
and
Nice.
people miss that word initiation, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the thing about the universal rule, the only legitimate rule, the prohibition on the initiation of force absent consent,
Mhm.
is that the reason it's universally accepted is even those who don't accept it end up accepting it. And this is what I mean by that. So, and actually, this is beautifully articulated, much better than I'm going to say it, in a paper that Professor Party wrote called Disabusing the Law of Abusive Rights. It's something like that. I can get the name of it for you.
Okay.
We can put it out on X. But basically, it's the idea that either you agree that I must not, initiate force,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't agree and you sort of think might makes right, in which case, if I'm mightier than you, I can slap you down, right? So
Yeah.
either way, you accept this. See,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
the guns of the state are mightier than you, then they can slap you down. And so if what we have is like this night watchman state, that it just, all it does is, if somebody initiates force, it comes in and responds to that force.
Right. Right.
It works,
Yeah.
right? Because law is necessarily coercive. And so we better only be unleashing that coercion or that violence for very good reason.
Yes.
And so there's only one good reason. There
Yeah.
is only one good reason.
Right.
And the idea that, I agree with you. I agree with you about women and about sort of the overwhelmingly Marxist way in which they vote. It makes perfect and complete sense,
Of course. Yeah.
because the state is husband, right? I mean, there is
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of that Stefan Molyneux says that I don't agree with, right? I mean, I don't just,
Yeah. Yeah.
follow every single thing. He's not my pastor.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But he has a couple of things right.
Yeah.
And one of them is that, when you introduce no fault divorce into the equation, then what you have is women looking for a husband.
Yeah.
Called the state.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So I mean, that's just a reality that happens. Who is more likely to want to aim the guns of the state at you, to take away your stuff and redistribute it? Men who are perfectly capable of going out and getting it themselves, or women who are more reliant on
Right.
that distribution of resources, right?
Right. Right.
Of course, speaking in general terms, clearly,
Yeah.
I'm not one of those women.
No. And actually, yeah.
But
Well,
and again, hashtag not all white trucks, like totally.
Yeah.
Like that, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking about sort of basic trends. And so, I mean, and to your remarks about Generation Alpha, again, I think that the best way to make sure that we get out of this is to get them out of the Marxist reprogramming gulag we call public school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that is what churns out people who take these ideas on faith. They don't even know they're taking it on faith, but they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That being mean is violence, that saying something mean is literally violence, which makes no sense. Because not literally violence, like maybe metaphorically violence, but not literally, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, these ideas are very, they take hold, and they take hold of these young minds in a formative stage, and it becomes a very it's like you say, who is it easier to convince that liberty is a good idea? Possibly someone with less brainwashing.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure, for
Which
sure.
your mechanic probably has endured less of than
Yeah.
your social scientist. That's just the bottom line.
Yes. Oh, I agree. And to me, that once again, that when you talk about that stuff, that's to me, it solidifies, which is, it's kind of tells me that, you know, we're trying to, we're trying to tweak or tinker around the edges. But what I find so profound is really at the end of the day, what that tells me is actually, the underpinning, the teachings of the Bible in terms of, family cohesiveness and all that stuff. That is so important. I didn't realize that when I was younger, even as I get older as an adult, I didn't realize just how important that was, not just in terms of keeping your family together, but it's that balance too. And you don't even just want parents, but it's kind of a good thing to have parents that have their typical, like women to have their typical traits, right? Not saying there can't be exceptions, outliers, and men to have their typical traits, because it's that balance that really helps your children, because they see that there's not just one side of the story, a one size fits all solution. There's compromise. Men have different ideas, women have different ideas, and it's that finding that way to come together and figure out what's going to be best for the child. That's so amazing. And then, of course, the extended family and then community reinforcing all that stuff, and of course every other aspect of your culture. That to me is so important. But this is stuff that's been talked about forever, and yet here we are, like I say, in this modern world where that's all seemingly gone by the wayside. And it's just every time I listen to anyone who represent the establishment, politicians, either side of the political divide, obviously, well, especially when you're talking about politicians, the media, those in academia, every time I listen to these people, and I listen to them tremendously because I like to hear what, the people that want to enslave me, I like to know how they think, right? But I hear them every problem now, every single problem, bar none, the only solution is some kind of state intervention. It's just, it's nothing about saying, well, let's get our community together or let's get our family together. It's always the state is going to be the answer to the solution. And I think that has filled up, that has really filled up the space of where the family and extended family and your community. And if you have that, like if you make family your core unit of your society, right? And the extended family and the importance. Here's another thing. I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you before, is, and it just, whether you believe in God or just evolution, it's amazing how it works. So we all come into this. I've said this many times. We all come to this earth naked. Well, I don't even think you have to use the naked thing actually, but we're completely reliant on the world around us. We're basically helpless, right? But the beautiful thing about the human experience, and you don't even have to rely on altruism, right, is we go out of the earth the same way. We come into the earth completely relying on everyone to take care of us because we're in the most vulnerable stage in our life. But we, on the other side of that, get into that same very vulnerable state where we're relying on everyone else when we're in our final stage of our life. Now, you got to think historically, or at least this is what I do, is I try to think about these things. So if you think historically, even a mom and dad, let's say, didn't want to stay together, or maybe didn't have the greatest, closest relationship, or even the grandparents or stuff, but everyone realizes that it's, the young people rely on the older people when they're babies, but the older people, well, you're going to rely on those young people once they become older to take care of you. But now that the state has filled that void, people no longer have that automatic state of mind where it's like, even if I don't like my kid or my grandkid, boy, I better treat them with a little bit of dignity, a little bit of respect, maybe get them to think critically about things because I'm going to be the one going to be relying on them, right? But once again, the state has stepped in to fill that void. But because the incentive structure of people who function in the status paradigm is completely different than it would be as, like I say, a parent with their own personal reason and their own personal self-preservation as the driver, which that's, to me, as a libertarian, I don't rely on altruism. I'm glad there are some people who are altruistic in some way, as long as they're doing it for good reasons, but I don't have to rely on altruism. I just have to rely on the fact that every human being has at least some baseline of rational self-preservation as the core. Otherwise we wouldn't exist, right? So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that stuff?
Oh boy. Okay. Um, I suppose mutually assured destruction
Mm,
is of some comfort to me. Um,
right.
certainly, what I've seen of my fellow citizens over COVID,
Mm,
that doesn't instill much confidence in altruism,
right.
or I mean, I suppose it's a good thing that they're relying on me for certain things,
Mm,
and I'm relying on them for certain things, because otherwise, we might be in trouble. But I do think I do think that the plans, um, that perhaps, whatever you want to call them, we all know who they are, sort
yeah.
of. It's
Yeah.
a,
Yep.
it's a vague, it's a shape. We have an outline of it. I mean,
Mm,
we certainly know that they have other plans, right?
mm,
Than our cooperation and prosperity. And I mean, it's becoming really very obvious that dependency is the goal.
mm.
That um, people like you and I are just as kind of throwing a spanner in the works.
Yeah.
That I think the middle class isn't really working out for them. I think it's obvious that they don't want you to have independent thought. If they did, you wouldn't get kicked out of a school board meeting for coming
Right.
in and saying, I don't think that the kids should be learning this, or you know you wouldn't have such a difficult time, um, talking people into following market signals,
Mm,
and how that might be a better idea than just trying to sort of centrally plan, all of these strange things. And you wouldn't have people thinking that we should all just kind of be sent to a concentration camp if we're not going to toe the line, right? I mean, this comes from somewhere, and it doesn't come from the naked baby, or whatever you said, right?
right. 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 Right.
This is learned. I mean, there are things that are a part of our nature, things like selfishness, right? And pride, and this sort of thing. But this idea that, everybody, should be a slave
Mm,
to the state,
mm.
that's not really a thing. That's not really a nature thing. That's something
No.
that we're taught, right?
Yes. Oh, for
I
sure.
hate to be on repeat, but we're
Yeah.
taught it at school.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yep.
the problem now is, I mean, I used to have some interactions with direct democracy people, the yellow vest people, whatever, those people.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I didn't join or anything like that, but I'm a little like you, and I'm happy to hear, sort of people's different ideas, because
Yep.
this isn't working. So,
Mhm.
what do you have to say, sort of thing. In my view, the problem with real democracy now, or with opening up the Constitution and amending it, or with anything like that, is that I no longer trust my fellow citizens to be any smarter
Mm.
than the state, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or,
I
or yeah, and a heck of a lot less crafty than the state as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. Actually, it's funny you talk about the direct democracy because a shout out to the Swiss Libertarian. I'm actually going to, at some point in time, we haven't set it up as of yet, have a conversation with him, because he was mentioning he's from Switzerland, obviously Switzerland, the Swiss Libertarian, but he was talking about the direct democracy thing. And I'm more than willing, and as you're well aware of, and nobody ever has to worry about saying anything. I actually like learning things, so never feel in 1 minute if you disagree with what I say, obviously say everything that's on your mind, because that's actually how I learn. Matter of fact, the only reason why I'm even as knowledgeable as I am today is because I've had to learn a lot of stuff and had to humbly accept the fact that I was wrong on many areas, many fronts in the past. So I have no problem with that. But I definitely want to hear him make a very strong case for direct democracy. But I gotta admit, I'm kind of like with you. I just don't have faith, right, that no matter how you play things out in terms of giving certain representation to certain people, it's basically still at the end of the day, you know whoever can amass the biggest gang, whether it's just one gang or if you get a whole bunch of gangs together, right? It basically is just the power of numbers. And to me, numbers should never be the final arbiter or equation that dictates as how your life should be run. Because like I said, we have the 20th century just for the recent century to point out how terrible and how bad that can go, how wrong that can go. So I'm not a big fan of democracy by any stretch. And even when I was younger, and if you say this to most Canadians, they'd probably look at you with shock and awe. But like democracy, just the concept of what the mob. Have you ever seen what fuck happens when you put a whole bunch of people together? How fucking insane they are. I mean, I'm not even a big sport fan, but I watch a lot of my friends that are. Well, I hate to pick on the Leafs, man, but these fuckers haven't won anything. I've been alive longer than the Leafs have ever won. And some of the people, and like I said, I love you guys and all, but man, your reverence for a bunch of fucking losers, it's kind of sickening, to be honest with you. It's that blind loyalty and stuff. And the only thing that's it's based on is because they play to the fact that we're social creatures, right? We got to be parted, we got to belong. So I get, and of course that can be a good thing, but once again, it can also be used for nefarious reasons and purposes. And yeah, I'm never been a fan of the majority of the mob. And then when I think of all the examples through all of history, it was always an individual, right? I can't even point to one example where a collective, right? Something like a brains in a tank or the Borg, right? Come up with all these concepts and ideas that at least got us out from actual human ownership, right? It was actually, or so that we understand that the total Meg system was a terrible way to try to figure out our immediate solar system and the universe. No, it took a guy like Galileo or Copernicus to help figure these things out. It was the individual with the individual brain that helped figure it out and put us on a much better path of understanding the world, at least in terms of the physical realm, right? So I always understood that it's actually the individual mind. Now, that's not to suggest that we should be all isolated and alone or anything, but it's the individual mind because we all are individuals at the end of the day. Nothing against Siamese twins. I like them too, right? But yeah, we're typically all individuals. So yeah, the whole idea or the concept, and I've seen once again, whether you're talking the Ash experiment, right? What's the Stanford prison experiment? How many examples, not even using the 20th century in terms of the wars and the conflicts, but how many times have we seen these experiments set up where the mob will, or people that are actually intelligent individuals will conform to the mob, even if they know that like the line is, this is the one it's supposed to be. This is the same as this one, but I'm going to pick the other one because the rest of the mob said the opposite. So yeah, not a fan of democracy by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Absolutely. And actually another experiment comes to mind, and that's the Milgram experiment. And I think that's what we just watched during COVID, right? Is if I put on the white coat, who will just listen to me? And terrifyingly, that was most people. Most people will listen to the guy in the white coat.
Yeah, the guy in the white coat literally replaced the man in the cloth, right? He literally and that's the thing. And that's another thing that bothered me so tremendously about that thing is I love science. Even as a kid, I tell you, science and math were my strong points in school. I love them. I love science and math. And to see them try to soil and sully. And then I think, is that why the dark ages come to exist? That people fucking got convinced that because people that said they were representing science at the time completely distorted it so that people no longer even believed in science. Because I sure as shit don't want that to happen in this modern 21st century, but I could see how it's very much possible because the way they used the science. No, there's the scientific method. To me, there's no such thing as the science. There's a methodology in how you discern truth from falsehood. And once again, even that doesn't always guarantee anything until you can test whatever your hypothesis is constantly and forever until you can universalize it. Don't talk to me about trust the science, especially in particular when I watched with my own eyes and listened with my own ears some people with degrees in those white lab coats, right, who have a lot of reverence from the public, and I kind of had reverence for them to a certain degree, but they literally. And I will say, I won't even say this. I won't say that they bold-faced lied. Some of them did, although most of them, what they did is they just omitted or misinterpreted facts and used politics as the basis for that, right? Or their preference in terms of an outcome. So it wasn't science, but they thought if we use this, right, if we coerce, we might be able to get this, but without understanding that even if you think that this will help, like, if you get 100% of the people with vaccines in their arms, that you might do this for the greater good. But once again, you're not thinking of the ethical implications of forcing yourself, using force, coercion, and violence, basically, because that's what the needles, the jabs were. People say, oh, there was no one in Canada was pinned down on the stretcher, right, and forced to take a vaccine. No, because most people have that rational self-interest enough and understanding that, yeah, I guess I'll just comply, right? Because I don't, but how many people, we saw how much it got escalated to anyone that did try to defy them. And I don't know if there was anyone in particular. I can't say I can think off the top of my head of people who were basically like killed or anything, but locking them in cages or but like I say, giving them fines that basically takes away their income for a certain period of time. Those are quite brutal in nature to do to a human being for doing nothing more than just accepting that their bodily autonomy. And most people weren't doing it under the pretense they were going to cause harm and harm. It's people like myself. I didn't take the vaccine because I realized I didn't need it, nor was I ever going to place anyone that was vulnerable in any position that I was going to be any harm to them. I would have never done that. I have a brain in my head. But that was the thing, that autonomy, that sovereignty was taken away from me to the point where I never got to see any of my grandparents who did pass away during COVID. And I didn't even get to go to the grandmother that helped raise me. She was kind of like my surrogate mother when my mom and my real dad went through a divorce when I was 8 years old. And she was so important to me. Like, she was one of the most important people in my life. And I never got to say goodbye to her. I never got to go to her funeral. And those things alone, like to see, and the fact that people were willing to go along with that and to treat people in such a way. Jody, you get me when you talk about the COVID stuff. I could literally go on forever. It was fucking believable what these people did.
That's horrifying. That is absolutely horrifying. I'm so sorry that happened to you personally. I know it happened to a lot of people. I'm sorry for them as well. Just what a cruel and terrible thing. I will say, this idea that nobody was coerced into taking a vaccine, nobody was forced, and you see this in judgments. You see this in judgments from the court that no, they had a choice, and the choice was to vaccinate or to lose their job. But when have we ever thought that your money or your life constituted a legitimate choice? Right. And that's basically what they're saying, right? Yeah. That when someone comes, behind you, sticks a gun in your back, and it says your money or your life, well, you have a choice. Just give them your money if you want to live, or you cannot do it and you can die. That's how they're treating this. Everyone had a choice. It was a choice. No one was forced. I mean, we're talking about, like you say, a mother or a father having the choice between being able to feed their children or not.
Yeah. Nice choice. Yeah.
I mean, that's not a choice. And our law didn't used to view that as a choice. Another thing our law didn't used to view as a choice is religion. If you were a religious person, that was not deemed to be a true choice. Religion is an immutable characteristic. Right. We have case law that says religion is an immutable characteristic. And yet, many religious people were denied EI benefits after losing their job because the EI Commission and the Social Security Tribunal agreed, and the federal court agreed with them that if you refused to be vaccinated on account of your religion, that you had voluntarily committed misconduct. Where is the voluntariness if religion is an immutable characteristic and your religion compels you to abstain from vaccination? It makes no sense. No. And this is why I'm pretty black-pilled, right? I mean,
and these were all people with lots of degrees lying on their wall who should be intelligent individuals, right? And that's the part that I've kind of understood, because in my own family, I have people in like academia and in professional trades such as doctors and nurses and stuff, and I've always understood that yes, these people are very proficient at their duties. They've learned how to repeat and regurgitate what they've been told and what they've been taught, which is one. But once again, the fact that these people will talk this stuff without even somehow even, I don't even see it in their eyes where they feel the guilt of the implications of, yeah, but there's ethical fucking underpinnings here. You gotta talk about the ethics of this stuff, but nobody wanted to talk about. And these are people, like you say, who would typically, be in positions of high stature and reverence. And that was the thing that be different. It was just some knuckle dragger on the side of the street that was saying this stuff. But these are people that, Canadians typically looked up to and revered, and thinking that they've obviously put in all the work and the effort. They're highly educated, so they should be able to understand these things. But no, they were more than willing to. And like I say, I was kind of going down that, whereas they weren't lying, but they were omitting a lot of stuff or completely misrepresent it. To me, it's almost like they're basically using like the legal sphere, because you can really, through the legal sphere, even whether you're defending a rapist, or like, you can really manipulate the language pretty good, right?
Well,
I'm not suggesting all lawyers are bad or anything, but like, it is kind of skill you have to learn, where you can interpret and misrepresent words to make really bad things sound good, right? And that was quite something to witness.
and they were outright suppressing. I mean, the authorities,
Yeah,
the state, and its minions, the media, were outright suppressing information. That's not science. When you suppress anything that can falsify your science, that's not science, right? We're not having a fight about science. It's not like, these Neanderthals don't believe in science and these other people do believe in science. This is not what we're talking about. This is not as between, I believe in science and I'm just superstitious. This is science versus science, right?
Yeah.
So, just the suppression of, I mean, ivermectin is banned here. You can't get it.
Yeah.
Unless you get it from India or something like that, right? Why is that? An otherwise completely harmless drug is banned.
Yeah, no, it was nuts.
Right?
Yeah.
Mebendazole. You can't get a doctor to prescribe you mebendazole in Canada. Go try.
Yeah.
If they'll prescribe you that, they won't. And so, if you have to try that hard to suppress other things that some doctors and some researchers, and I mean, there are research papers out of Japan and India and, even China and places like that, where people are saying, some of these other things are effective. If you have to suppress that information, you're not a good faith actor. It's kind of like with the climate change thing. Do not talk to me about that. You are not willing to look at Gen 4 nuclear.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I will just assume that you are not a good faith actor.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
There is a solution. If you want to get rid of the problem as you see it, there is a perfectly good solution. You're suppressing that solution and you're pushing this into where you want it to go, right? Where you're going to give people, their whatever it is, 10 square meter plot that, that's where you'll live and you'll be happy about it, or whatever is being said. You want to push it. This is about control. And this is what I said at the beginning of COVID too. Is there a virus? Probably. Is this about a virus? Absolutely not.
No.
About control, right?
Yeah.
And you think that way or you don't. And I don't know the answer to getting other people to think that way. People who wake up in the morning and basically assume that the government is looking after their best interests. I mean, I'm a person who wakes up in the morning and assumes the government is going to try to screw me today. So
yeah,
you're one or the other, I guess. And I don't know what the difference is. I don't.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about the COVID thing, I can't help but think, I have to believe, or at least I convince myself, right? It could be naively or falsely, but I convince myself because I watched, like I said, I paid astute attention, especially when I was like, because I work in construction building roads, and in New Brunswick in the wintertime, we get laid off for a few months because you just can't do anything in the wintertime. So, and in those months, I was like just morning to night almost, right? Leaving some time for the family and stuff, but just constantly just going through everything that I could possibly find. And when we started seeing the numbers coming out province by province in terms of vaccinations, so this was after the vaccines were rolled out, and I kept seeing Ontario in particular, and I was watching New Brunswick and a couple out west and stuff. But I kept seeing these numbers where they were showing hospitalizations, death, because that's the way they would break them, the COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, right? Was the three dominant numbers that they kept trying to use. And I kept seeing all these numbers. So let's say there was 1,800 people in the hospitals in Ontario. Let's say I'm just picking a number at the top of my head. Let's say, 1,200 of them in there were vaccinated, and 600 of them weren't. Although the numbers were actually much more skewed, even higher. Now, I understand the argument from the other side, from the opponents of my position, right? The ones that are parroting or promoting the narrative, where they'd say, well, of course there's going to be more vaccinated people in the hospital because there's less of an actual representative number of unvaccinated, which, yes, that's true. So let's say there's only, 15% of Canadians that are unvaccinated, 85 are vaccinated. Well, then, yes, of course. But it's like, but yeah. Okay, I get that. I get you're playing the data. I get stats. I'm all into statistics. Like I say, I love math. But can we step back first to the fact that there's fucking 1,200 people who are vaccinated who are in the fucking hospital? I don't care in terms of how you break it down per GDP or per capita, per person. Well, there's 1,200 people who you fuckers told that if you get vaccinated, you don't have to worry about any of this shit, are either in the hospital or dead. Right? So there's that. But the thing that I would keep hearing the media or the experts, how many times did we use they use the word expert during COVID? To me, is like that was key. We're like, oh, they're bringing another propaganda that's going to parrot the narrative, because that's the only time they ever use the word expert. If you're someone that won't go along with that, you could have all the academic credentials as humanly possible, Bhattacharya, right? And you're not an expert, you're a fucking conspiracy theorist. But no, I had to laugh it wasn't funny at the time, right? But to see that. But I got to think, even with all the rhetoric, and they were good at the rhetoric. Like I say, one thing I will say that the left are really good at, it's rhetoric. It's amazing. Talent stories, fucking awesome. The right wing, pale in comparison to the left in terms of sowing a tale or whatever, right? And being inventive and creative with the language. 100% there. But I got to think in these hospitals, they won't say nothing because either NDA or they just want to keep their job. But you just know, if you're working in them hospitals, even people who are tacitly going along with the program, right? And you're in there like, oh, what? Another 10 patients come in? Oh, and they're all vaxxed to the max. Well, isn't that? No, damn well these people, even though they won't say anything, I have to believe in my heart, in my mind, that at least that silent majority, a sizable portion of them, at least know what the fuck's going on. Whether they'll admit to it, I don't know. It depends on if you can get them alone, right? And they're not scared of who's going to hear what they say. Maybe. But I just have to believe, because, if you're smart enough to get into these, higher education and all that stuff, come on, you have to at least have somewhat of a brain power going on there, that you see that if there's a whole lot of people in your hospital that are fully vaccinated, that should at the very least tell you that, well, these vaccines aren't doing anything even remotely close to how they were talked about, right? And the fucking propaganda campaign, the fucking, to me, the advertisement, it was just blatant advertisement for COVID, for vaccines, the way they were going. I don't know if in Canada it did much, but I'm just thinking of, was it the New York guy there eating the fucking fry? You get a fried burger, man. It's like, really though? It's like, that's how you're going to sell the fucking vaccines? You get a free frying a burger? Well, I guess people will fucking do it. They're like, well, I guess I'm going to have to anyways. Might as well get my frying burger to go with it.
I know. Oh, I know.
It was nuts, man. It was nuts. But yeah. So did you pay attention to any of that when it was unfolding? Because like I say, if not, if you're ever really bored, go through my live streams, like I say, and you'll get because I showed it all on the screen too. Like I would I would embed the article in the description of the video. So I had it, and this would even come from like Canada.ca, like their own Statistics Canada's website. So you can't say I'm using some fucking Russian disinformation.
Right.
I always used, and that's why I always did this. And people, a lot of the right wingers would say, man, why you fucking watch CBC or Global News or all? It's like, because I'm thinking of the kind of people I'm trying to convince. And the people I'm trying to convince, they're not going to listen to me if I go to antiwar.com or go to alexjones.com. Yeah, here, you'll get this. No, I realize that they're susceptible. They're believers. They're firm believers in the system and the media apparatus. So here, I'll use their sources against them. And it was right there. It was right there. And like I say, if you ever want to go back and check them, you can see all of them. I'd have the chart on the screen with all, like I say, all these patients that are in there that are, fully vaccinated. I'm not even at the later stages, it wasn't just the vaccines, but they even had booster shots. Right. And that was another thing that I watched too, is them constantly talking about, I don't know, it was Omicron, then this blah, blah, AXB, blue, blah, blue, whatever the hell. But they kept going. And then this was before they come out with the updated version, the Omicron related vaccine, it's adapted for Omicron. They were still promoting the original ones for the first, I don't know, Omicron and a bunch before the new ones were out, and saying, go ahead and get your vaccine. But it's like, Jesus, that's the same as even in the flu. Like, if you go get like a 3-year-old flu vaccine for one that just came out this year, it's probably not going to help you out a lot. And that's the thing. They were even telling people to go get these vaccines that were really only constructed or created to target specifically the original strain or the Delta. So even when all these other variants were coming out, they were like, still going for the original ones. Like, well, even in the flu world, which wasn't controversial just a few years ago, people were like, well, no, I'm not going to take a fucking flu vaccine from 3 years ago when there's a whole new virus out today. I want the one for the one that's out today, because the old one's probably not going to do me much good, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
well,
anyway.
And just very recently, I'm sure you're aware of this, Health Canada has ordered all of the vaccines to be destroyed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, why is that?
Well, I would suggest not quite as many people are on, vaccine number. They're not quite ready or willing to line up for vaccine number 8 at this point. Right.
Right. Is that the one that we're on?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just totally throwing a number out there, because I lost track after, I think, what was it, the first 4 boosters or so? Because to me, it's like, you got to take 6 vaccines.
Right. I receive something in the mail from Bonnie Henry every once in a while telling me that they've saved my vaccine. It's there at my local whatever pharmacy or Costco waiting for me.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, but
yeah.
This is where we live now.
Yes, no, it's wild. Actually, you know what, Jody, I just noticed that I'm just over the 2-hour mark, and to be honest with you, I could go on a marathon here all day with talking, because I'm so happy to be able to get a chance to catch up and refresh things with you. But rather than do that, because people typically, a couple hours are what most people I find are kind of susceptible to doing. So what we'll do is I think we'll just maybe tie it up on a lighter thing, in terms of, I was going to ask you about Tom there, and then maybe we'll just tie up this live stream. As much as I've enjoyed it, like I say, but what I will do is actually ask you, now that you've done it, it's not that big of a deal. It's just 2 of us talking there, but I'd love to invite you on again. And if you have a channel for yourself, I'd be more than willing to come on your channel or your show. But I would love to have, obviously, further follow-up and subsequent conversations with you, because like I say, it's been a long time, and I know that you've always, I remember even back then, you were very grounded. You had a great mind, and you had well articulated thoughts. You seem to be a fellow traveler. And actually, as someone like myself, I really appreciate having someone that's, a thinking person like yourself, but can kind of push back a little against me or offer me different perspectives, because that's what I really enjoy. To me, that's how I expand my knowledge, is, talking to people from all kinds of areas and backgrounds, so that I'm, getting some information that maybe I wasn't susceptible or thought about prior. And I think you're one of those people that can help me do that. So if you'd be willing to do it and have some further conversations, that would be great. What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, I would love that. And it's been a pleasure to catch up with you today. I appreciate this so much. It had been way too long, and I would love to do it again. And I would actually like to say that you shaped me as well.
Oh,
I
wow.
regret that I can't remember the exact thing, but it was about 10 years ago. And, I was very much figuring things out, and my views have changed probably fairly drastically even since then. I think back then I was maybe something more like a conservatarian. I really sort of had by that one foot
Yeah.
in conservatism. And I remember that you challenged me on something, and I didn't agree, and we just agreed to disagree. And it was several years later, like not months, not weeks, years later, something happened. And I just remember thinking, Bennett, he was so right. He was so right. So it's a two-way street. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. But I will just say this, like, I will accept that I have some part of it because I'm trying to amass this information for myself. But I too, just like you, the only thing that I can say is, I mean, obviously I have to put it all together in my cranium, but I'm very grateful for the only reason why I'm even remotely as knowledgeable as I am, and have been able to help you in any way or any regard, is because others have done so much for me. And I'll just say that I'm grateful, not just for you, but for everyone else out there. And like I say, that's why I love having conversations with anyone. I'll talk to people, although they don't typically take me up on the offer, but I'll talk to a left-leaning person, I'll talk to anybody, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe, like, I believe that, as humans, we're not all good, we're not all bad, we're somewhere where we can be mostly good, or some. I just believe that people there is no such thing as where you can silo everyone and say, oh, these are just bad people and these are the good people. I think everybody, well, I don't know, maybe not, but I like to believe that everybody is, at least, which is why I would always put my best foot forward with anyone, is at least, at least if you're willing to engage, that to me tells me at least you're willing to try to hammer out and have a conversation. And that to me is much better than what was Jordan Peterson said, there's either fight or flight or talk, more or less. And that's not the exact words, I'm paraphrasing them there. But yeah, so, fighting, I'm not, I mean, I will if I have to. Once again, I'm not adverse to fighting, but I prefer not to be honest with you. And flight, I've never been a coward, so I don't really want to flee or run away from things. Besides, it doesn't help anything. Even growing up, when you think you can avoid politics, well, it doesn't avoid you. So there's that. So really, at the end of the day, what do you have left? Well, it's the conversation, the fact that we're given these beautiful verbal skills that we're given as human beings, that, unlike nature, like, we have this ability. We have such a large vocabulary, especially in the English language. And if we can talk about these things with each other, I just got to believe that, whether it's like, whatever the reason behind it, people are going to be more susceptible to it. Not everyone, mind you, but I think these conversations are what's helping bring these things forward. And if it's helped you in some way, and like I say, you've helped me and others have helped me. So I just got to think, one here, one there, even if it took you a few years, who cares? I mean, I'm just grateful for the fact that if I can contribute in any way to help someone else and make their lives positive, which in turn will make maybe the positive life of the people around them or the community that they live in. I mean, that's a benefit, because I get to benefit from that, right? Matter of fact, if I'm living around a bunch of well-adjusted, decent fucking human beings, that's really great for me, right? Maybe we could get back to the point sometime where maybe I can leave my keys in the car, right? I don't know about that, but no, but like they used to be able to do back in the day at some point in time. But no, like I say, I'm not a utopian. I realize that things are not perfect, and things probably never will be. But at the very least, right, the people with bad or ill intentions are relentless in their pursuit, for their own rational self-interest. So on as the opposite of that, I think it's really important that people like us that have the skills, the courage, once again, I appreciate you for coming onto a live stream. Not a lot of people or some people are, not fans of live stream, but that's what we have. That's what we have at the end of the day. Like I say, without having to resort to violence, is pushing back against the people. If they're going to be as relentless of bringing their bad ideas to the forefront, well, like I say, liberty ceases to exist if we're not as relentless, and maybe even more so in our willingness and our courage of our convictions to do the exact opposite and bring good ideas to the table. And I think that's what's going to at least help in some regards. Not going to make everything perfect, right? We're not all going to, it's not a story fairy tale story that's going to have a perfect ending that I believe, but we can at least do whatever we can do to try to make at least our particular little spot on this planet as best as we can. And I'm very grateful for you doing that. Now, like I say, before I do tie this up, I was just curious, and go as long or short with it as you want, but I remember Thomas, he was a pretty good cat there too. He was a pretty good guy, or Tom actually. Yeah, he went by. But I haven't talked to him. I think in probably about the same amount of time I haven't talked to you. Have you talked to him at all recently, or how's he doing, or anything like that?
When we wrapped up our show, I went to law school.
Right.
Tom got out. Tom has left the country.
Oh,
So I'm extremely happy for him. As I understand it, he's doing well.
excellent.
He's happy and healthy, and that's what I know. Tom was just the best friend and sort of brother figure
Yeah.
to me. I mean, Tom and I got along clearly.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so he's absolutely a wonderful human being, and the show benefited from his sort of Austrian economics bent.
Yes.
And it was an amazing experience, but it is no more. And Tom is living the dream. I believe in the excited states of America.
Oh, awesome! Right. So he actually has. So he actually is afforded, and he's surrounded with more people that actually understand that it is important to have freedom of speech and all the other things that it entails. So good for him. Good for Tom. I'm happy for him, and hopefully he's doing well. And once again, I'm very, very grateful that we got to have reached out to each other again. As it's funny how this happens, and there's so many other than just you that I've kind of lost contact with over the years. It's just the way it is. It's nobody's fault. I've moved a couple times in between. You've done your thing. You went to law school, so I get it. I mean, it's only normal for adults. You're not always going to be active, involved in each other's lives all the time. But once again, I'm appreciative of the fact that we've actually had this chance to engage again, and I'm really, really looking forward to doing so a few more times in the future, and maybe for as long as I can keep it going as humanly possible. And once again, thanks for doing the live stream, because this is typically how I like to do things now in the live stream. And there's kind of two reasons for that. I like the free flow. I think my audience in particular likes the fact that everything I do is pretty much, like I say, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'll do a live stream because I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything to set up. I just like to have a conversation like I would with anyone. And like I say, that's kind of something my audience has come to appreciate with me. And actually, I'm sorry for the folks who are in the audience. I see there was a bunch of comments, and I would have got to them, but I was just having such an engaging conversation with Jody. But the next time we'll kind of do it, maybe a setup, maybe a little bit lighter conversation. Will depend on what it is, and maybe we'll do some engagement with some of you folks in the chat as well. But anyways, thanks again, Jody. Really appreciate it. And if there's anything that you want me to share, like I don't know, any websites or anything that you want known to people, just send it to me in a follow-up message, and I'll place them in the links of the description of this live stream. And I'll look forward to us having a conversation again.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Have a good one, Jody.